How pitiful. My sister-in-law's voice was a low chuckle as the society blog published the guest list. My name conspicuously absent for a party on a yacht that bore my name. They had orchestrated a magnificent play to hide the cracks devouring their legacy, then pushed me out of the frame to make the family portrait look complete. More cruel than the exclusion was the patience with which I'd lulled myself to sleep, telling myself it was just a mistake, time and time again. How many dinners had I sat at their table believing I belonged, only to realize my seat had never been set for me? Today, I stopped making excuses for them, and when I step onto that deck with an envelope they forgot about, you'll want to see who's really leaving the table. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. The air inside the Davenport estate always carried a distinct, unmistakable scent, a blend of decades-old polished mahogany, the faint mothball aroma from antique Persian rugs, and a touch of cold dampness that not even the roaring fire in the marble hearth could ever fully chase away. It was the smell of time itself, of a glorious past clinging desperately to the present. I always felt like I was stepping into a museum whenever I arrived for Sunday dinner, an immutable ritual my mother-in-law, Beatrice, considered the very foundation of cosmic order. Tonight was no different. My husband, Adrian, gave my hand a gentle squeeze as we walked through the towering oak doors. "Just hang in there," he whispered, a familiar mantra I had heard countless times. I managed a smile in return, knowing full well that my efforts to hang in there usually just dissolved into the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the mansion. The dining room was the Davenport's grand stage. Everything was arranged to impress. The heirloom silver cutlery aligned with millimeter precision, the crystal glasses shimmering under the pale golden light of the chandelier, and at the center of it all, Beatrice, seated at the head of the table like a queen presiding over her miniature kingdom. Beside her was Serafina, Adrian's older sister, who perfectly mirrored their mother's cold, aristocratic demeanor. "Isabella, you're here," Serafina said, her voice devoid of any warmth. Her eyes swept over my minimalist silk dress before landing on the bottle of wine in my hand. "Oh, a Vintner's Reserve. How interesting." "Hi, Serafina. I thought everyone might enjoy it. It's from a new winery in Napa Valley. They're doing incredible things with microclimate technology," I explained, a hopeful enthusiasm in my voice. Serafina's lip curled into a smirk. "Technology? Wine isn't a mobile app, darling. Its quality comes from the soil, from legacy. Just like a family," she signaled to the butler. "Please bring up the 1982 Chateau Margaux from the cellar. Let's drink something with a bit of depth tonight." I quietly placed my bottle on the sideboard. There it was again. Another small attempt to share a piece of my world, a world of innovation and modern success stories, brushed aside by the fortress they called legacy. Adrian took my hand under the table, a silent, comforting gesture. He knew. He always knew. But he rarely spoke up. Dinner proceeded as usual. Beatrice lamented the difficulty of finding a gardener who could trim the boxwood hedges in the proper Davenport style. Serafina complained about some new money family buying the lot next to the yacht club, disrupting the harmony of the area. Their stories always revolved around maintaining a status quo, a social order that seemed to exist only within the walls of this estate. I could see the signs of decay they tried so hard to conceal. The Persian rug under my feet, though intricately patterned, was frayed along the main walkways. There was a small water stain on the ceiling near the chandelier, cleverly disguised by the lighting, but my analyst's eye for detail couldn't miss it. The silver, while gleaming, had tiny, almost imperceptible dents, signs that it was no longer maintained by the finest craftsmen. The Davenport estate was like a grand old ship, still majestic in appearance, but below the waterline, the hull was beginning to rot. "How's your business doing, Isabella?" Marcus, Serafina's husband, asked, perhaps trying to break the awkward silence. Before I could answer, Serafina cut in. "You mean her little startup? I hear those tech things are so volatile. A unicorn one day, a ghost the next." I took a deep breath, keeping my voice even. "It's not a shop, Serafina. It's a data analytics platform, and we just closed our best quarter ever, secured our Series C funding, and we're preparing to expand into the European market." Beatrice set her fork down with a soft but definitive click, a signal that the topic was unwelcome. Money is just a means to an end, dear. What matters is whether what you build will last. The Davenport legacy has endured for 4 generations. That is true value. Legacy. The word was invoked again, like a magic spell to ward off the real world. I didn't tell them that their legacy, the high-end import company Davenport and Sons they were so proud of, was in a nosedive. I knew because I'd spent a weekend analyzing their public financial reports, shrinking profits, soaring overhead, and a complete lack of an e-commerce strategy. They were trying to race a horse and buggy in the Formula One. Later that night, back in our penthouse, the silence of the glass walls felt louder than the manufactured chatter at the Davenport estate. I poured a glass of water, my gaze falling on the unopened bottle of Vintner's Reserve still sitting on the kitchen counter, a silent testament to my failed attempt at connection. My success had bought me everything: independence, this sweeping view of the city, the power to shape the future. But it couldn't buy me a way into their world. I did it all for Adrian, but tonight, his silence at the dinner table had made me feel even more alone than Serafina's scorn. I had built an empire from nothing, yet I was powerless to build a bridge to his family. The contrast between their world and mine was never starker than on Monday morning. I woke in my penthouse, where floor-to-ceiling glass walls welcomed the city's brilliant sunrise. There was no smell of old mahogany here, only freshly ground coffee and the crisp air of a new day brimming with potential. My office was on the 48th floor of a skyscraper, an open-concept space with a minimalist design where the energy of innovation and ambition felt almost tangible. Everything, from the smart lighting to the interactive whiteboards, was designed for one purpose: performance. The report on customer retention since we rolled out the new algorithm is in, my assistant Leo announced as I sat down, up 18% from last quarter. The ROI on this project is far beyond our projections. Excellent. Forward the data to the marketing team. We need to leverage this for the upcoming campaign, I commanded, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was my world, a world of clear metrics, measurable results, and actions that had a real impact. Here, your value wasn't determined by the name you carried, but by what you could accomplish. I remembered 6 months ago, right after Adrian and I got married, naively believing I could bridge these two worlds. With the enthusiasm of a newcomer, I'd spent 2 straight weeks researching Davenport and Sons. I built a detailed 30-page business plan proposing a complete digital transformation, building an online sales platform, optimizing the supply chain with AI, and reaching a new generation of customers through digital marketing. I thought I was offering them a lifeline. I presented the plan in a private meeting with Beatrice and Serafina. Adrian was there, sitting silently beside me. I spoke their language, emphasizing how this would preserve and enhance the Davenport legacy for the 21st century. When I finished, Beatrice gave me a smile that was equal parts patronizing and pitying. Isabella, your enthusiasm is admirable, but you don't understand. Davenport and Sons doesn't sell products. We sell an experience. Our clients don't scroll through websites to shop. They come to our stores. They want to be catered to. It's tradition. But Mother Beatrice, that tradition is costing the company money, I countered as gently as I could. It's just a difficult market phase, Serafina interrupted, her voice dripping with false confidence. Thank you for the plan, Isabella. But this is a family legacy, not some tech startup. Some things can't be measured by ROI. The meeting ended there. My plan, into which I had poured so much of my expertise, was probably filed away in a drawer, never to be mentioned again. Adrian drove me home in silence. When I asked him why he hadn't said anything, he just sighed. They're set in their ways, Izzy. It's hard to change them. From that day on, I stopped trying. I learned to compartmentalize my life. Isabella Reed, the decisive and successful CEO from Monday to Friday, and Isabella Davenport, the quiet, faded wife at Sunday dinners. I loved Adrian's gentle nature, his kind heart, and the way he looked at me as if I were the only miracle in the world. And maybe I did it for myself too. Growing up in a small, fractured family, I had craved belonging to a clan with a deep history, to be part of the legacy they were so proud of. I'd naively believed I could earn my place with sincerity. I told myself his love was enough to make up for the rest. But as I stood in my office looking down at the city in constant motion below, I couldn't ignore the fault line growing wider. The Davenports were living on an island of their own making, an island that was slowly sinking into the sea, and they were refusing every lifeboat because they weren't luxurious enough. I had built my own fleet, and I was beginning to wonder how long love could survive when one person was sinking and the other was flying. The fault line I'd felt in my office that day was no longer a vague premonition. It was about to become a chasm, and the bridge across it was a 70-meter yacht of steel and glass, a reward I had gifted myself after the biggest deal of my career. I named her the Veritas, the truth, because to me she was tangible proof of a simple principle. Success doesn't come from an inherited legacy, but from sleepless nights, calculated risks, and an indomitable will. The Veritas was the fruit of selling my first startup for a figure even I hadn't dared to dream of. She wasn't a toy. She was a statement, a floating fortress of white steel and teakwood where I could escape the suffocating rules of the mainland and breathe the clean air of absolute freedom. Adrian's name was on the ownership papers, too, a gesture my lawyer, Philip Grant, had called tax savvy. At the time, I thought of it simply as a symbol of our partnership. I never imagined that for the Davenports, it was a back door they could sneak through to plant their own flag. The attack began subtly, as it always did. Serafina and Beatrice invited me to tea on a Tuesday afternoon, an unusual occurrence given their schedules were as rigid as a royal train timetable. They didn't summon me to the Davenport estate, but chose an exclusive country club where the air was thick with the scent of old money and whispered judgments. "Isabella, dear," Beatrice began after the waiter had poured the tea, her voice alarmingly sweet. "As you know, Davenport and Sons is approaching its 120th anniversary. It's a monumental milestone, not just for our family, but for this city." I nodded, waiting. I knew this wasn't just idle chat. Serafina took over, setting her teacup down with a theatrical flourish. "We're planning a small event to celebrate. Nothing too ostentatious, just an intimate gathering of our lifelong partners and the family's closest friends. And we thought, what better venue than the Veritas? She's so elegant, so worthy of the Davenport name." A chill went down my spine. They weren't asking. They were informing. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "That's a wonderful idea. I'd be happy to host an event for the family." "Wonderful," Serafina said, her face beaming as if I'd just handed her the keys to a kingdom. "You won't have to worry about a thing. Mother and I will handle all the arrangements so you can focus on your work." And that's when I was slowly, methodically edged out. In the weeks that followed, emails and texts about the event flew back and forth, but my name was only ever in the CC line, a passive observer. Serafina hired a renowned event planner who had worked for European royalty. She dictated everything, from the varietal of lavender imported from Provence to the limited production champagne. Every time I tried to offer an opinion, maybe we could have a contemporary jazz band instead of a classical string quartet, I was met with a condescending reply. "Isabella, you just don't understand. Our guests expect a certain standard." My initial annoyance morphed into a vague sense of dread. I felt like I was losing control of my own ship. Adrian, as usual, tried to placate me. "It's just a party, Izzy. You know how she is. She loves being in charge. Just let her have her way and it'll all be fine." But it wasn't fine. The first crack appeared in an email from my best friend Sloane, a society columnist. The subject line was a single word: "Seriously?" Inside was a link to a preview post on a popular high society blog. The headline read, "Event of the Century. The Davenports celebrate 120 years of legacy at sea." The article went on to list a long roster of the most anticipated faces who would be in attendance, from banking tycoons to politicians. I read the list 3 times. Adrian Davenport's name was there. So were Beatrice's and Serafina's. The name Isabella Reed, or Isabella Davenport, was not. My heart skipped a beat. I showed the phone to Adrian. He frowned, scanning the article. "It's gotta be a mistake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You know how these bloggers are, always going for sensationalism. I'll talk to Serafina. I don't know if he ever spoke to his sister, but the next blow was even worse. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a file shared in the Davenport family group chat. It was a message from Serafina, sharing the seating chart for everyone's reference. I opened the PDF with a cold, creeping fear. It was a detailed diagram of the main deck, with over 20 meticulously arranged tables. I found the head table, where the names of Beatrice, Marcus, and Adrian were printed. The seat of honor next to my husband was not for me. Instead, it was clearly labeled Chloe +1. Chloe, the Pilates instructor Serafina was always raving about. I stared at that name for a long time, until the letters blurred before my eyes. This wasn't an oversight. This was a declaration of war. I had been replaced, not just excluded from the guest list, but erased from my place beside my husband. I looked over at Adrian, who was standing by the window, pretending to be busy on a call. I knew he'd seen the message too. His silence was more painful than any word could have been. A cold, sharp rage began to build inside me. I was about to type out a message demanding an explanation when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail notification. From Serafina. I was surprised, thinking maybe she was calling to explain. But when I hit play, I realized it was a mistake. She had sent it to me by accident. Serafina's voice came through, not meant for me, but clearly for her husband, Marcus. It was gloating, triumphant. I've handled it. No one will be ruining the energy of the party anymore. No more silly tech ideas or modern wines. The focus will be entirely on our family, on our legacy. Things are finally back where they belong. There was a short pause. Then she let out a little laugh. She doesn't even know what's happening. It's honestly pitiful. I listened to the message 3 times, the feeling of numbness growing deeper with each replay. Pitiful. The word bored into my mind. They weren't just excluding me. They were mocking me. They saw my silence as stupidity, my concessions as weakness. Minutes later, probably after realizing her catastrophic error, Serafina sent a frantic text message. The words appeared on my screen, dripping with false sincerity. Dearest Isabella, something absolutely dreadful has happened. I was just speaking with the event planner and discovered a terrible clerical error. Your name was left off the final list. I'm working to fix it, but it might be too late as everything has already been printed. I'm so sorry. I feel just awful. I stared at the message and laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Her audacity was breathtaking. She couldn't even be bothered to invent a better lie. I didn't reply. I put my phone down and walked out onto the balcony, breathing in the cool night air. I needed to think. The initial rage had subsided, replaced by a cold clarity. I was wrong to believe I could ever belong. I was wrong to think Adrian's love was a shield. In this war, I was on my own. And then, the final piece of evidence arrived, not from a leak or a clumsy mistake, but from the very system I had built. An automated email from the Veritas's management system, one I'd insisted on installing to track all onboard activity. The subject line was simple. Notification, primary guest list updated. I opened it. The content was even simpler. A single, computer-generated line, emotionless and irrefutable. Request from Mrs. Serafina Davenport, remove Isabella Reed from attendee list. Status, completed. That was it. The final, undeniable proof, sealed with a digital timestamp. Serafina hadn't just planned it, she had executed it. She had walked into my home, used my property, and then ordered my own existence to be erased from it. I closed my laptop. The feeling of betrayal was gone, replaced by a resolve as hard as steel. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my patience for submission. They thought I would quietly accept defeat, that I would stay home and weep while they celebrated on my yacht, built on the foundation of my labor. They were wrong, but before I called Philip, I found Adrian. He was on the balcony, staring blankly out at the city. I came up beside him, not with evidence, not with anger, but with a voice heavy with exhaustion. Adrian, I need you to talk to them. Just this once. I need to know you're on my side, not just in silence. He turned, his face a mask of torment. Izzy, you know what she's like. Making a scene will only make it worse. Just let it go. After the party, things will calm down. Nothing is going to be calm, I replied, all hope draining from my voice. When you say nothing, your silence is your consent. He didn't answer, just sighed and turned away. In that moment, I knew I was utterly alone in this fight. The shield of his love couldn't protect me. I picked up my phone, not to reply to Serafina, but to call the one person who could help me now. Grant Legal, how may I direct your call? Philip, please, I said, my voice steady without a tremor. Tell him it's Isabella Reed. We have work to do. The game was over. The real war was just beginning. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at their party anymore. I was going to remind them that I owned the whole goddamn ship. The atmosphere on the main deck of the Veritas was perfectly staged, like a set prepared for a grand theatrical performance. Warm, golden light from brass lanterns mingled with the amber glow of the setting sun over the sea, creating a scene of shimmering, ethereal beauty. A string quartet played Vivaldi, their elegant melodies drifting over the murmur of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses. Waitstaff in crisp white uniforms moved gracefully through the crowd, carrying silver trays of champagne and exquisite canapes. Every detail, from the white orchids in crystal vases to the intricately embroidered D&S, Davenport and Sons, logo on the linen napkins, screamed one message: class, legacy, permanence. It was a perfect performance, and Serafina was its star. I watched her from a distance, through binoculars from a car parked at the end of the pier. She wore an emerald green evening gown, her hair swept up in a flawless chignon that exposed a proud neck and heirloom diamond earrings. She glided among the guests, a perpetual smile fixed on her lips, every gesture radiating the self-assuredness of a true hostess. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, played her supporting role brilliantly. She sat on a velvet settee, surrounded by her old friends, fanning herself with a feathered fan while recounting tales of the family's golden past. They were master actors, playing the roles of their lives on a stage that I had built. Adrian stood near them, looking out of place in his own tuxedo. He held a glass of champagne, but I didn't see him drink. His smile was strained, his eyes darting constantly toward the gangplank, as if waiting for something. Maybe for me, maybe for an escape. He was the only one in this play who knew the stage was about to collapse. They're quite the performers, Philip Grant, my lawyer, remarked from the driver's seat. He wasn't in a suit, just a simple but expensive blazer. His expression was completely calm, as if we were preparing for a board meeting, not a family showdown. But every play must have a finale. And we're here to bring down the curtain, I replied, lowering the binoculars. I took a deep, steadying breath. There was no anger left in me, only the sharp focus of a surgeon's scalpel. Let's go, Philip. It's time. The car rolled slowly toward the pier. When we stepped out, every head turned. I had chosen my outfit carefully. Not a glamorous gown to compete with Serafina, but a perfectly tailored jumpsuit in ivory silk, powerful and elegant. I wore no jewelry except for the Patek Philippe on my wrist and simple pearl earrings. My hair was down, styled naturally. I hadn't come for a party. I'd come for business. As we walked up the gangplank, the music seemed to quiet. Conversations died down. I could feel dozens of eyes tracking my every move. I saw Serafina's face tighten, her hostess smile freezing on her lips. Beatrice stopped fanning herself, her eyes narrowing with displeasure. Adrian looked both relieved and horrified. I didn't look at them. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, walking with absolute composure. Philip was a step behind me, carrying a slim leather portfolio. His presence sent a clear message. This was no social call. When my feet touched the teak deck, a few guests began to whisper. The play had an unexpected twist. A character not in the script had just made her entrance. Serafina quickly regained her composure. She walked toward me, attempting to assume the role of a gracious hostess, welcoming a latecomer. Isabella, she said, her voice straining for cheerfulness. You're so late. I was beginning to think you couldn't make it. I would never miss such an important event on my yacht, I replied. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for those nearby to hear. I put a deliberate emphasis on the words, my yacht. A flash of anger crossed Serafina's face. What a strange thing to say. This is a family event. Come, let me introduce you to a few people. She tried to take my arm, an attempt to control the situation, to pull me into her narrative. I took a subtle step back, evading her grasp. Thank you, Serafina. But I can introduce myself. In fact, there's someone here I'm very keen to see. I moved past her, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the deck. My eyes scanned the crowd, bypassing the curious faces, and settled on an older man with silver hair and a perfectly tailored suit. He was standing with a group, holding a glass of whiskey. Arthur Sterling, the legendary investor, the Midas King of Silicon Valley. The man the Davenports were banking their entire future on impressing. I walked directly toward him. The crowd parted like water as I passed. Philip followed close behind. As I approached, Mr. Sterling turned. His eyes lit up with genuine recognition. Isabella. What a surprise, he said, his voice a deep, powerful baritone. He extended a hand. I didn't realize you were interested in these old maritime legacies. I shook his hand, my grip firm. Mr. Sterling, it's a pleasure to see you again. Actually, this isn't an old legacy. It's a new investment of mine. Mr. Sterling raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his smile. So, this is where you spent your bonus from the Helios deal? I must say, you have excellent taste. I've always believed a good investment should bring you joy as well as returns, I replied. Our conversation had become the center of attention. Serafina and Beatrice hurried over, trying to insert themselves into the circle. Mr. Sterling, it's such an honor to have you here tonight, Serafina said, trying to reclaim the spotlight. I'm Serafina Davenport. Our family has... Mr. Sterling gave her a polite nod before turning his full attention back to me. Isabella, I just read the proposal for Project Chimera this morning. Very impressive. Your team has done outstanding work. I think we have a massive opportunity here. I agree, sir. We believe it will redefine the entire industry. This was the moment. The stage was set. The audience was in place. It was time for the curtain call. I turned to Mr. Sterling, but I pitched my voice so that everyone on the deck could hear. A hush fell over the party, leaving only the sound of gentle waves lapping against the hull. It's wonderful to see you here, Mr. Sterling. Your presence makes this evening all the more special, I began formally. I had no idea my husband's family was also interested in Project Chimera. What a fascinating coincidence. I paused for a beat, glancing at Serafina and Beatrice. The color was beginning to drain from their faces. However, I continued, my voice calm and professional, as the owner of this vessel and your primary partner in the upcoming project, I'm afraid the plans for this evening will have to change slightly. I believe your time and mine would be better spent discussing real opportunities, rather than attending a social gathering. I turned to the ship's captain, who was standing at a distance, and gave him a nod. Captain, please prepare the conference room on the upper deck. Mr. Sterling, my counsel, and I require a quiet space to work. The collapse was immediate and total. My words, delivered with cool professionalism, ripped through the velvet curtain of the Davenports' carefully constructed play. They laid everything bare in under 30 seconds. I was the owner. I was the one with the real power. I was the business partner Arthur Sterling admired, and the Davenports were merely actors on my stage. Serafina was speechless. The blood drained from her face, leaving it a ghastly white. Her hostess' smile shattered, revealing the panic and disbelief underneath. Beatrice clutched her chest, looking as though she might faint. The entire legacy they had fought to project had crumbled like a sandcastle against a tidal wave. Mr. Sterling, without a moment's hesitation, turned to me with a broad smile. A fantastic idea, Isabella. I always prefer working with people who get straight to the point. Lead the way. He completely ignored Serafina and Beatrice, as if they were decorative furniture. As Philip and I started to walk with Mr. Sterling toward the stairs leading to the upper deck, I could hear the whispers erupt behind us like a wildfire. Guests exchanged meaningful glances. They had just witnessed a spectacular transfer of power. The Davenport name, which they had come to honor, had suddenly become meaningless. The real power tonight belonged to another name, Isabella Reed. The victory was absolute, as clean and sharp as a perfect algorithm. But as I walked up the stairs for a fleeting moment, I felt an empty sadness. I had won the battle, but the price was the last illusion of a real family. I hadn't just sunk their play, I had sunk my own secret hope. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could feel Adrian's eyes on me. I didn't know what he was thinking. Shame, anger, or maybe even a flicker of secret pride. But it didn't matter anymore. Tonight, I was not his wife. I was not the Davenport's daughter-in-law. Tonight, I was the master of the Veritas, and I had just ordered my ship to change course. The conference room on the upper deck of the Veritas was my world. Unlike the ostentatious luxury below, this space was designed for a single purpose: efficiency. Dark walnut walls, a long conference table of glass and steel, and an interactive screen that took up nearly an entire wall. The large glass window looked out onto the endless night sea, a space of quiet and complete separation from the chaotic drama unfolding on the deck below. Our meeting was brief. Arthur Sterling was a decisive man who wasted no time on pleasantries. We went straight into the details of Project Chimera, outlining timelines and delegating responsibilities. Philip documented everything with a veteran lawyer's precision. Not once during the meeting did Mr. Sterling mention what had happened downstairs. To him, the Davenport's drama was a minor interruption, an insignificant off-key note in the grander symphony of business. He cared only about results, and he knew I was the one who could deliver them. "Isabella," he said as we concluded, shaking my hand again, "tonight you've shown me more than just an impressive business plan. You have vision, and more importantly, you have the courage to execute it. I very much look forward to working with you." "Thank you, Arthur." "As do I replied, feeling a solid, unshakable confidence settle in my chest. When we escorted Mr. Sterling to the pier, where his private car was waiting, the scene below had completely changed. The quartet had stopped playing. Most of the guests were gone. The few who remained were huddled in small groups, whispering and glancing our way. The party was dead. The opulent atmosphere had evaporated, leaving behind only awkwardness and undisguised curiosity. The embroidered D and S logos on the napkins now looked ironic, like relics of a fallen empire. I left Philip to handle the final arrangements with the captain as I returned to the main deck. There, amidst the quiet chaos, were the ruins of the Davenport clan. Beatrice, Serafina, and Adrian stood clustered near an empty table, looking isolated and lost. They were no longer the hosts of the party. They were merely actors abandoned by their audience after the play had ended. Serafina saw me first. Her eyes blazed with pure hatred. She stormed toward me, her emerald gown looking garish in the bleak setting. "You ruined everything," she hissed, her voice sharp as a razor. "Everything. This was our last chance. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," I replied, my voice like ice. "I stopped you from turning my yacht into a stage for your lies." "Your yacht?" She laughed bitterly. "Adrian's name is on the papers. This is family property." "A name on a piece of paper doesn't grant ownership, Serafina, especially when you intentionally try to erase the actual owner's name from the guest list. You went too far." "I did it to protect this family," she screamed, pointing at me. "You're an outsider. You could never understand what legacy means. You come in here with your money and your wild ideas and think you can buy everything." "I don't need to buy your legacy," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping low, "because I'm building my own. One based on truth and competence, not on delusions of a dead past." Beatrice finally spoke, her voice trembling with shock and rage. "How dare you? After everything this family has done for you?" I turned to her, my gaze unflinching. "What has this family done for me, Beatrice? Grudgingly accepted me? Belittled my every accomplishment? Tried to make me invisible in my own home? Don't mistake my silence for agreement. I have tolerated enough." Throughout the confrontation, Adrian had stood silently, his face pale and pained. He looked from me to his mother and sister, torn between two colliding worlds. I expected him to remain silent, to once again choose the path of conflict avoidance as he always had. But then, something unexpected happened. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing himself between me and his family. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet but filled with a power I had never heard from him before. He turned to Serafina and Beatrice. "You've both gone too far. Not just tonight, but for years." Serafina's jaw dropped. "Adrian, what are you saying? Are you taking her side against your own family?" "I'm taking the side of the truth," Adrian replied, his gaze steady. "We've been living a lie for too long. We cling to the Davenport name as if it's some magic shield, when the reality is we're sinking. We treated Isabella horribly, not because she did anything wrong, but because her success was a spotlight on our own failures." He turned back to me, and in his eyes, I saw a profound regret. "I'm sorry, Izzy," he said, his voice catching. "I've been a coward. I saw everything they did to you, and I did nothing. I chose silence to keep the peace, but all I did was allow you to get hurt. I let them make you an outsider in our own marriage. I am so sorry." He stepped forward and took my hand, right there in front of his mother and sister. It wasn't just an apology. It was a choice, a declaration. In that moment, he shed the weight of the Davenport name and chose to stand with me, with our future. Beatrice put a hand to her mouth, looking as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Serafina stared at Adrian with a mixture of fury and betrayal. Their play had just lost a key actor, and without him, the entire stage collapsed. In the days following the party, a heavy silence fell over the Davenport estate. The social calls stopped. The plans for future events ceased. Their reputation was in tatters. The story of what happened on the Veritas spread like wildfire through high society, embellished into a legend of a spectacular coup. The Davenports were no longer a prestigious family. They were a cautionary tale. A week later, I called a meeting. Not at the Davenport estate, but in the conference room of my office. When Beatrice and Serafina walked in, the contrast couldn't have been clearer. Here, amidst the glass walls and modern technology, they looked lost and obsolete. Adrian sat beside me, not as their son, but as my partner. I didn't waste time. I projected the charts and figures I had analyzed onto the large screen. Revenue, profit, cash flow, market share. They were all a sea of red, painting an undeniable picture of the collapse of Davenport and Sons. "This is reality," I said flatly, "not a difficult market phase. This is the result of years of mismanagement and refusal to adapt and living on a fantasy. In 6 months, the company will have to file for bankruptcy." Beatrice closed her eyes. Serafina just stared at the numbers, her face blank. For the first time, they couldn't use legacy or tradition to argue against the cold, hard truth of the data. I paused, looking directly at them. "Before I talk about the solution, I want you both to understand something. I am not doing this out of spite. I endured your treatment in silence because I once hoped to be a part of this family. But you took my silence for weakness and tried to erase my existence from my own property. This is not a hostile takeover. This is a survival measure. I will not let this company die," I continued, "not for its name, but for the employees who have dedicated their lives to it, and because it is a part of Adrian." I laid out my terms. They were simple and non-negotiable. "I am restructuring the company. My firm will acquire a majority stake for a symbolic price. I will inject capital, replace the entire leadership, and implement my technology to turn it around. And the condition," I said, looking straight at Serafina, "is that you will step down from all management positions, immediately. Mother," I turned to Beatrice, "you may remain as honorary chairwoman, but with no decision-making power. All strategic decisions will be made by me and my team." It was a complete takeover, an unconditional surrender. Serafina opened her mouth to protest, but Adrian put a hand on her shoulder. "Take the deal, Serafina. It's the only way." In the end, they nodded. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice. The relationship had been reset. The order had been changed. The Davenports were no longer the grantors of acceptance. They were dependent on my decisiveness. The respect they now had to show me was no longer a choice, but a condition of their survival. That evening, Adrian and I stood on the deck of the Veritas. The yacht was gliding smoothly through the calm water. There were no guests, no orchestra, no lies. Just the two of us and the truth. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" Adrian asked, his voice contemplative. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but that's their problem. Your problem is learning to forgive yourself and to start living your own life, not the one they laid out for you." He squeezed my hand. "The real legacy. It's not the Davenport name, is it?" I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder and looking toward the horizon, where the city lights glittered like a promise of a new future. "No, it's not. The real legacy isn't what we inherit, it's what we build." The ship continued to move forward, cutting through the darkness. For the first time, I felt the Veritas was truly living up to her name. She wasn't just a yacht. She was my truth, my space, the proof that when people try to erase you, the best revenge isn't to shout louder, but to build a world of your own so vast they can no longer ignore it. If you found this story compelling, please like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the video on the left. Thanks for listening.